In just 41 seconds, one of Britain's most beloved actors was pushed to his absolute breaking point on live television. What started as a conversation about Michael Caine's legendary career turned into a brutal verbal battle that ended with the iconic star storming off set while cameras were still rolling. The heated exchange exposed a side of morning television that viewers rarely see, and what Lorraine Kelly said to provoke his exit has left the entire nation talking. Before we get into what happened, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We bring you daily videos exposing Britain's darkest scandals, the confrontations they don't want you to see, and the moments that reveal what really goes on behind the scenes of your favorite shows. Last night's episode of The Lorraine Kelly Show was supposed to celebrate Michael Caine's incredible contribution to British cinema. The legendary actor, now in his 90s, had agreed to appear on the morning talk show to discuss his new memoir and reflect on his decades-long career. But within minutes of sitting down, the atmosphere turned ice cold. Michael Caine walked onto the set to warm applause from the studio audience. He looked distinguished in a tailored navy suit, moving a bit slower than in his younger days but still carrying that unmistakable presence that made him a star. Lorraine Kelly greeted him with her trademark smile, guiding him to the sofa with what seemed like genuine warmth. "Michael, welcome, welcome. It's so lovely to have you here," Lorraine began, settling into her chair across from him. "Now, you've written this new book, and I have to say, there are some fascinating stories in here." Michael nodded, a slight smile on his face. "Thank you for having me, Lorraine. Yes, it's been quite a journey putting all those memories down on paper." "I bet it has," Lorraine said, flipping through some notes on her cards. "You've had such an extraordinary career. From Alfie to The Dark Knight, you've done it all. But I want to start with something that caught my attention in the book. You talk about your early days, growing up in South London, the poverty you experienced. Very humble beginnings." "That's right," Michael replied, his voice still strong despite his age. "We didn't have much, but we had each other. My mother worked incredibly hard to keep food on the table." Lorraine leaned forward slightly. "And you mentioned that those experiences shaped your entire outlook on life, your work ethic. But Michael, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, some people have pointed out that over the years, you've become quite comfortable criticizing modern Britain, talking about how things have gone downhill. Isn't that a bit rich coming from someone who left the country for tax purposes?" There was an uncomfortable pause. The studio audience went quiet. Michael's expression shifted subtly, the warmth draining from his eyes. "I'm sorry. What?" Michael said slowly, his famous voice taking on a harder edge. Lorraine continued, seemingly not noticing or not caring about the change in atmosphere. "Well, you moved to Surrey. Then you spent time in America for tax reasons. You've been quite vocal about Britain's problems, but you weren't here paying your full share of taxes during some of those years, were you?" Michael's jaw tightened. "Lorraine, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. I've paid millions in taxes to this country over my lifetime. Millions. More than most people will ever see in their entire lives. But you did move abroad to reduce your tax burden," Lorraine pressed, glancing at her notes. "I'm just pointing out the contradiction. You criticized the state of the country, but when it came time to contribute at the highest level, you chose to protect your wealth instead." The legendary actor shifted in his seat, clearly trying to maintain his composure. "That's not what happened, and I think you know that. The tax situation in the 70s and 80s was confiscatory. The government was taking over 90% at the top rate. 90%, Lorraine. That's not taxation, that's punishment." "So it was about the money then," Lorraine said, a slight smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. "It was about being able to continue working and not having everything I earned taken away." "Yes," Michael responded, his voice rising slightly. "I make no apologies for that. I've worked since I was a child, and I've earned every penny through my craft." Lorraine flipped another card over. "Let's talk about your craft then. In the book, you're quite critical of modern actors, suggesting they don't have the same dedication, the same training, that they're more interested in fame than in the work itself. Don't you think that's a bit unfair? Every generation says the same thing about the next one." Michael took a deep breath, visibly trying to reset the conversation. "I didn't say all modern actors lack dedication. What I said was that the industry has changed, and not always for the better. The focus on celebrity culture, on social media followers, on image over substance. That's a real problem. But you benefited from celebrity culture yourself, didn't you? Lorraine interrupted. You were one of the first British actors to crack Hollywood, to become a household name. You enjoyed the fame, the recognition, the parties, the lifestyle. Of course I did, Michael said, his patience clearly wearing thin. But I never let it come before the work. The difference is that I respected the craft first. I trained in theater. I learned my trade properly before I ever stepped in front of a camera. Lorraine leaned back, crossing her legs. Some would say you're just bitter that the industry has moved on without you, that you're not getting the roles you used to get, so you're lashing out at the younger generation. The studio went completely silent. You could see Michael's face redden slightly, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. Bitter? He repeated quietly, dangerously. You think I'm bitter? I'm just saying what some critics have said about your recent interviews, Lorraine said with a shrug. You've become quite the grumpy old man, haven't you? Always complaining about how things used to be better. Michael stared at her for a long moment, and you could see him deciding whether to let it go or to respond. He chose to respond. Lorraine, I'm 90 years old. I've worked with the greatest directors, actors, and writers of the last 7 decades. I've been nominated for Oscars, won BAFTAs, entertained millions of people across the world. If I have opinions about how the industry has changed, I've earned the right to express them. What I haven't earned is sitting here being insulted by someone who reads questions off cards written by researchers. The atmosphere in the studio shifted dramatically. Lorraine's smile froze on her face. That's a bit harsh, Michael, she said, trying to laugh it off. I'm just doing my job, asking the questions that people want answered. No, you're not, Michael shot back, his legendary voice now filled with steel. You're trying to create a moment. Trying to make me lose my temper so you can have a viral clip for social media. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Lorraine's expression hardened. I think you're being paranoid, Michael. These are legitimate questions based on your own book and your own public statements. Paranoid? Michael's voice rose further. You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to paint me as a hypocrite and a has-been. You haven't asked me a single genuine question about my work, my career, the actual content of my memoir. All you've done is try to provoke me. If you can't handle a few challenging questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews, Lorraine snapped, her own composure beginning to crack. Challenging questions? Michael laughed bitterly. That's what you call this? You know what a challenging question is, Lorraine? It's one that makes someone think, that explores complexity, that actually engages with the subject matter. What you're doing is tabloid journalism dressed up as a talk show. Lorraine sat up straighter, her face flushing. How dare you? I've been doing this for 30 years, and you still haven't learned the difference between an interview and an ambush? Michael fired back immediately. The tension in the studio was now unbearable. The crew members were exchanging nervous glances, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let it play out. The audience sat frozen, witnessing something that felt far too real and uncomfortable for morning television. Lorraine's voice took on a sharper tone. You know what, Michael? Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe the problem is that you can't accept that you're not the legendary figure you once were. You're just an old man clinging to past glories. There was a collective gasp from the audience. That was the moment everything exploded. Michael Caine stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His face was now fully flushed, his eyes blazing with an anger that was both terrifying and mesmerizing to watch. How dare you, he said, his voice trembling with fury. How bloody dare you sit there and speak to me like that? I've forgotten more about acting, about cinema, about entertainment than you'll ever know. I've worked with giants, real artists, people who had something to say and the talent to say it. And you sit here on your little morning show, reading your little cards, thinking you can diminish what I've achieved? Lorraine stood up as well, matching his energy. This is my show, Michael. My show. And I'll ask whatever questions I damn well please. If you can't handle it, there's the door. Oh, I'll use the door, don't you worry, Michael spat back. But before I do, let me tell you something, Lorraine. You want to know why I criticize modern Britain? It's because of people like you, people who have no respect for achievement, for experience, for actually doing something meaningful with your life. You make your living off other people's accomplishments, picking at them, trying to tear them down to your level. Well, I won't be torn down, especially not by you. Get out then, Lorraine shouted, pointing towards the exit. If I'm so beneath you, just leave. With pleasure, Michael said, ripping off his microphone. The sound made a loud pop through the studio speakers. You know what the saddest part is? I actually thought this would be a pleasant conversation. I thought we'd talk about the work, about the stories, about the incredible journey I've been privileged to have. But you had to make it nasty. You had to go for the cheap shots. That says everything about you and nothing about me. Lorraine's face was bright red now, her carefully maintained TV persona completely shattered. You're impossible. This is exactly why people say you're difficult to work with. Difficult to work with? Michael laughed harshly. I've worked with everyone, Lorraine. Stanley Kubrick, Christopher Nolan, Woody Allen, John Huston. Directors who demand excellence, who push you to be better. And not one of them would tell you I was difficult, because I gave them my best every single day. But I don't suffer fools. And I don't sit quietly while someone tries to make me look small on television. You're making yourself look small, Lorraine shot back. You're throwing a tantrum like a child. No, Lorraine, I'm standing up for myself, which is something you clearly expected me not to do, Michael said, gathering his jacket from the back of the chair. You thought you could bully an old man on television, get your ratings boost, and I'd just sit there and take it. Well, surprise, I've got more self-respect than that. A producer tried to step onto the set, attempting to calm the situation, but Michael held up a hand. Don't bother, he said to the producer. I'm done here. I should never have come in the first place. Lorraine, perhaps realizing that the situation had spiraled completely out of control, tried to change her tone. Michael, please, sit back down. We can continue the interview properly. Now you want to do it properly? Michael said incredulously. After you've spent the last 15 minutes trying to humiliate me? No, Lorraine, I don't think so. I've been in this business for 70 years, and I've learned when to walk away from a bad situation. This is one of those times. You're overreacting, Lorraine insisted, though her voice had lost some of its edge. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of the disaster unfolding on set. Am I? Michael's voice was quieter now, but no less intense. Let me ask you something, Lorraine. Why did you invite me here today? Was it genuinely to discuss my book, my career, my life? Or was it to create exactly this kind of scene? Lorraine didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation told everyone watching everything they needed to know. That's what I thought, Michael said, nodding slowly. You know, I've done thousands of interviews over the years. Some good, some bad, some brilliant, some boring. But I've never felt quite so disrespected as I do right now. And the worst part is, you did it with a smile on your face, pretending it was all in good fun. It was just questions, Michael, Lorraine said weakly. Just questions based on research. No, it was character assassination disguised as journalism, Michael corrected her. There's a difference, and deep down, you know it. You wanted me to lose my temper so you could have your moment, your viral clip, your headline. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. He started walking towards the exit, moving slowly but with unmistakable dignity despite his anger. The studio audience watched in stunned silence as one of Britain's greatest actors prepared to leave the set. Lorraine, perhaps realizing how badly this would play, tried one more time. Michael, please, I apologize if I offended you. That wasn't my intention. Michael stopped and turned back to face her. If you offended me? If, Lorraine, you compared me to a bitter old man who's past it. You suggested I was a tax cheat and a hypocrite. You mocked my opinions and dismissed my career. There's no if about it. You knew exactly what you were doing. I was trying to have an honest conversation, Lorraine protested. No, you were trying to have a confrontation, Michael said firmly. And you got one, but not the kind you expected, because I refuse to play your game. I won't sit there like a trained seal, performing for your cameras while you take shots at me. The producer stepped forward again. Mr. Caine, please, if we could just take a moment. I've taken enough moments in this studio, thank you, Michael said, cutting him off politely but firmly. I'm going to leave now, and I'd appreciate it if you'd stop filming. "The cameras are still rolling," Lorraine said, and there was something almost triumphant in her voice. Michael looked directly into the main camera. "Good. Then let everyone see this. Let them see what passes for morning television these days. An ambush dressed up as an interview. A host more interested in controversy than conversation. If this is what British broadcasting has become, then maybe I'm right to be critical of the state of things." He turned back to Lorraine one final time. "You know, I came here today because someone on your team called and said it would be a lovely opportunity to celebrate my book and my career. They said you were a fan, that you'd loved my work for years. Either they lied to get me here, or you decided somewhere between that phone call and today that you'd rather make headlines than actually do your job properly. Either way, it's bloody disappointing." "I am a fan of your work," Lorraine said quietly, and for the first time she sounded genuine. "I've always admired you." "Then why did you treat me like this?" Michael asked, and the hurt in his voice was evident beneath the anger. "Why did you go out of your way to belittle me, to question my integrity, to suggest I was nothing more than a washed-up has-been with a chip on my shoulder? If that's how you treat people you admire, I'd hate to see how you treat people you don't." Lorraine had no answer for that. She stood there, looking smaller somehow, the weight of what she'd done beginning to settle on her shoulders. "I thought we were going to have a nice chat," Michael continued, his voice tired now. "I've got stories, Lorraine, hundreds of them, working with the greatest talents of multiple generations, being part of films that changed cinema, meeting incredible people, living an extraordinary life. I came here ready to share all of that. Instead, you wanted to pick a fight." "I'm sorry," Lorraine said, and this time she sounded like she meant it. "But it was too late." "So am I," Michael said. "Sorry I wasted my time. Sorry I trusted your production team when they said this would be worthwhile. Sorry that British television has sunk to this level where manufactured drama is more important than genuine conversation." He adjusted his jacket, straightened his tie, and looked around the studio one last time. "I've been on hundreds of sets, worked on dozens of talk shows, done more interviews than I can count. But I've never walked off one before today. You should think about that, Lorraine. You should think about what it took to push someone like me to this point." With that, Michael Caine turned and walked towards the exit. His steps were measured, unhurried, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing him storm off in a blind rage. It was a masterclass in dignity under pressure, the kind of controlled performance that had made him a star in the first place. Lorraine called after him one more time, "Michael, please." But he didn't stop, didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge her at all. He reached the studio door, pulled it open, and stepped through without looking back. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded deafening in the silent studio. For a moment, nobody moved. The camera operators, the producers, the studio audience, even Lorraine herself, everyone just stood frozen, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. The morning's carefully planned show had collapsed into chaos, and there was no script to follow for what came next. Lorraine slowly sat back down, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to compose herself. She looked at the camera, opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. What could she possibly say? How could she explain what had just happened? In the end, she couldn't. A producer finally made the call to cut to commercial, and the live feed went dark, but the damage was done. The confrontation had been broadcast in full, watched by millions of morning viewers across Britain. Within minutes, clips would be uploaded online, shared across social media, analyzed and debated by everyone with an opinion. But none of that mattered to Michael Caine as he walked out of the building and into the grey London morning. He'd said what he needed to say, stood up for himself when it mattered, and refused to be diminished by someone who didn't understand the difference between challenging journalism and cheap provocations. The legendary actor climbed into the car that was waiting for him, settled into the back seat, and let out a long, slow breath. His hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline, but his head was held high. He'd been through wars, poverty, rejection, failure, and success beyond measure. He'd worked with giants and held his own. He wasn't about to let a television host make him feel small. As the car pulled away from the studio, Michael looked out at the London streets he'd known his entire life. The city had changed so much since his youth, since those days in South London when he dreamed of becoming an actor. But some things remained the same, including his fundamental belief in treating people with respect and demanding the same in return. He'd walked off a television show for the first time in his long career, but he had no regrets. Sometimes, the most important thing you could do was know when to stand up and when to walk away. Today had been both,